After a long stint in Cancer and Leo, Mars has finally made its way into Virgo. Right before we start solstice time, Cancer season is here. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it is summertime. This is the weekly forecast for June 18th through 24th. So let's get into it. Now, welcome back to Yappin with the Stars, the show where I talk about life and spirit with the help of the planets, stars, and zodiacs, with a little bit of common sense thrown in there as well. I am your host and guide, Dr. Nicole Rouse, artist, anthropologist, and astrologer, along with being a dreamer. And here we do astrology anthropology my way, grounded in the body, tied to spirit, and connected to the world that we are living in. Now, every Wednesday, we check into the chaos we call society and ask two questions. What's the cosmos showing us this week? And what are we being called to move, build, burn, or create? Now, before I begin this week, I want to remind folks that in case you're new to my channel and or this show, right, that I'm a Western tropical whole signs astrologer, and that's how I construct the chart. But I use both modern and traditional understandings of the planets and zodiacs through a Black queer lens. For more information about that, you can check out my website, drnicolerouse.com, or the first couple of episodes of this show, in which I do talk more about my practice and my kind of logic and how I work with astrology. Now, if you're interested in reading with me, then go ahead to my website. Again, drnicolerouse.com/astrology. There you can find the various offerings that I have with a few new ones. And I want to take a minute to kind of highlight two new offerings that I'm very excited for, that I've been kind of tinkering with for the past couple of years. And now I feel more comfortable bringing them out into the public. The first one is called Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts. This is a reading that I focus on your nodes, along with what we call the dark houses in astrology. So those are houses 4, 8, and 12 of the chart, to see what your relationship is to your spirit, to spirit itself, your ancestors, and how to access it by working with the chart. The chart shows us many things, and this is one specialty that I have been working with various clients on for the past couple of years. And now that I've kind of refined my techniques, I'm making it an official offering for the public. And so here, I not only bring in my background as an astrologer, but also my actual training by various spiritualists and teachers in African American Hoodoo, Lukumi, and Haitian Vodou, to help with creating essentially a personalized ritual that you can work with to access your gifts, again, working with the chart itself. So if you're interested in kind of thinking about the relationship between sacred and mundane, working with astrology, check out the Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts reading. And the other reading that I'm really excited to offer in the public now, that I've been tinkering with for a few years, is my parent-child reading. So here, what I do is I work with a parent or parents to help retell the story of what it means to be a parent and to parent the child that you created, okay? And so this is essentially me working with the natal charts of the various folks that are involved in the parent-child relationship, so that we can kind of work through what actually makes sense for you and your family, versus trying to perform the scripts of what family is in a society that is constantly removing us from our humanity, right? And when I give natal readings, what I always tell clients is that I need to understand what shaped you, right? The kind of structures and systems that have shaped your sense of self, so that you can see if that sense of self actually aligns with the self that the chart's energies are showing. And so when I work with clients, I say the first institution that shapes us in our identities is the family. And so that's what I look to, the sun and moon and Saturn, to look at the ways that we were raised. And that story making and storytelling then sets the groundwork when I'm working with clients to figure out, okay, then what does it mean to understand your energy, how it may either conflict or contend with structures in society, and then what happens when you actually center the self, right? By coming back into the self as a means of possibility making and understanding how you navigate this thing called life, okay? So I'm doing that in these two new readings, Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts, and then also the parent-child readings. So for more information about that, go ahead to my website, and you'll also see my other offerings as well. Now, funny enough, When speaking of parents and children, this is a great way to get into the astrology of the week, right? Because we are entering into Cancer season full blown. But this Cancer season is really interesting because of the other planets and what they are doing at this time. And so when we enter into Cancer season, which this year is going to be June 20th, very, very late June 20th, this is also the time of the solstice. This is when we are mid-year, when the northern hemisphere, the sun is going to be out its longest. So a lot of lights, a lot of illumination, reminding us that we are halfway through a year. So where have you come from? Where are you now? And where are you going? Right? And with these kind of transits in Cancer, not just the sun and moon, but also Jupiter alongside other planetary placements, especially these outer planets, what we are really coming into this season that is going to be, again, a long-term conversation is asking us and kind of highlighting the question of what do we actually need, again, for nurturing and care? And whose definitions of those terms are we using? And do we know how to receive nurturing and care because they are such basic human needs? Because do we know what it means to be human anymore? Once more, can we remember again? All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into this weekly forecast, y'all. So we're starting off on the 18th, right? Now the moon's going to be in Pisces at this time. Now on the 18th as well, Mars is now officially in Virgo. It has been here for about a day, okay? And it's still in this square to Uranus and Taurus with a sextile to Jupiter and a loose trine still to Chiron that's in Aries. And remember, Jupiter's in Cancer right now. Chiron is in Aries. Now this past weekend, so I'm talking about the 14th, 15th, there was a lot of tense energy, right? As we are seeing Mars at a critical degree was in Leo, so 29 degrees, was really beginning its direct face-off with Uranus and Taurus, who's about to make its way to a critical degree as well in the sign of Taurus before it moves on to Gemini next month. Okay, so what did we see this weekend? We saw a lot of conflict globally, right? Even before the weekend, leading up to the weekend, there was a lot of global conflicts. You see Israel bombing Iran, right? You have this no Kings parade. You have the LA riots and the protests against ICE, not just in LA, but also in Chicago and other places, right? These kind of so-called sanctuary cities that Trump is very directly targeting. Then you also saw the unfortunate killing of those Congress folks in Minnesota, right, by a lone gunman. So that was just a few examples of how this energy was playing out. And I say that not to kind of do a grotesqueness of violence, not at all. I want us to understand that in these times of kind of crossroads and chaos, we are truly being met with the reality of how violent these nation states truly are, how the foundations of what holds these states to be so-called solid requires sacrifice, in particular human sacrifice. So are we willing to keep sacrificing ourselves for states and places that have shown us they will not take care of us? Care. Nurturing. Do we know what we need and want? And if so, what are we willing to fight for? Now, Mars goes into Virgo. This is an important transit because for the past, since September, October of last year, Mars has only been in two signs, Cancer and Leo, moving back and forth. Now, from past episodes in my Astrology 101, I talked about these because of what they represent, the luminaries, the sun and the moon, right? And this kind of sun-moon, which is both our sense of self, the sun, the ego, right? The passion, the drive, and then the moon, our bodies, our emotions, the materiality of our existence. The sun and moon is what constitutes us. But the sun and moon is also our parents. Who constituted us, right? So we were doing a lot of review, a lot of reflection, a lot of having to sit in the body, sit in the light, and figure out what we do with it. How do we strategize with it? Can we actually inhabit our own kind of vessel, our own resources, which is our body and its knowledge and its knowing? So with all of that, Mars is now making its way into Virgo, Virgo being Earth, being the other side of Mercury. Now, a lot of astrologers talking about Mars and Virgo being a time in which you can like get shit done, right? You can analyze and sort and make your lists and enact all these things you've been thinking and feeling for the past few months. I'm going to push back a little bit on that and say, in the context of the rest of the kind of transits and where we are seeing in society, Mars in Virgo is going to ignite the stomach. It is going to ask us what and who we truly believe in and why. Because if we've had to face our emotions, face our bodies, face our sense of self, well, then Virgo will ask us, how do we communicate that out? Virgo is not necessarily a sign that's all about being analytical and all about being, in terms of order. Virgo, like its sister sign of Pisces, is a location of mess. It just deals with mess differently. And we are in a chaotic mess. So when you are in chaotic mess and Virgo is now at the table, we have to remember something. The South Node is also in Virgo. We are all being asked to release the ways we have been taught analytics and criticalness that keeps us in an orderly fashion that is making us docile. So what happens if all that shit breaks? Well, Mars the past few months has been having us ruminate in the essence of our humanity alongside Venus. Remember, Venus and Mars are having a long conversation for a while, which is our sense of passion, drive, creativity, strategy, and how we love our relationships, justice, how we understand commerce and economies, right? All of that coming together, that is the essence of the human, that is culture, and how we express it and how we maintain it. Well, Mars in Virgo, that is squaring Uranus in Taurus, right? Two earth signs. Do we have stability? And if we don't, then what are the different strategies we must be deployed? So I want you to think about your stomach right now. These next 6 weeks, what is your stomach saying to you? What is your stomach's knowledge trying to relate to you? And do you believe it? And if you do, then what would you actually do? Okay, let's keep going. On the 20th, very late, as I said in the very big in the intro, we get the sun moving into Cancer, marking the beginning of Cancer season and the solstice. Now, I'm in the Northern Hemisphere. I live in Chicago, so we're starting summer, right? I'm a little summery right now because Chicago finally got its heat, and when Chicago goes from cool to warm, it really skips the warm and just goes to hot. So this is a time of intensification of heat in the north, right? Whereas in the southern hemisphere, we are seeing the beginning of winter occur. So here we are going to have the longest day of light. So what has been illuminated? Again, what has been illuminated for you over these past, 6 months that you can embody, that you can believe? Because remember, Jupiter is already in Cancer. So when the sun is there and Jupiter's at a very early degree, by the 24th, we are going to see Jupiter and the sun meet in Cancer, really expanding, right, the ideas of Cancerian themes. And if you remember what I talked about last week or 2 weeks ago with Cancer, it is not just this kind of emotion-filled sign that's always crying. Hell to the nah. It is nurturing, care, mothering, motherhood. It is creation. And creation can be a deadly bitch when it needs to be, right? In order to maintain creation, right? In a time of destruction. So when we're talking about the sun moving into Cancer this time, I think it's going to feel a little bit different now, y'all. It's going to be illuminated. You're going to be expanding. There's going to be an expansion of what? Your feelings, your body, your relationship to the waters, to mothering, to the primordialness, to your lineages, right? To nostalgia. Don't be surprised this Cancer season if there is a lot more nostalgia. If there's a reckoning with what is family, what is foundations, what is home. Right? We're going to talk a lot about home this Cancer season. And so with Mars in Virgo, you're going to realize real quick, home is the body. And if you have not made home in your body, then something else will house your body, which will then lead your action. So again, what happens if you take it back? Right? And on the 22nd, we're going to see Mercury, that's also in Cancer, sextiling Uranus, again in Taurus, and the moon, because Uranus and the moon are going to be in a conjunction in Taurus, right? And that square with Mars is still in effect here. So on the 22nd, right, as Mercury now enters more into the conversation, remember it's one of its signs, Virgo, is also activated now with Mars. There's a way that we're going to have to learn how to express our needs, communicate our needs, say them out, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it shakes the motherfucking table and foundations of what you thought were safety and security. What happens when we realize that what needs to emerge from the shore right now and be explored is truly what is security and safe and health for the body. We're going to be talking a lot about family, family planning, community, community care, children, childhood, parenting, parents this next season, because that is the foundation of society, which means that is the foundation that we really need to start cracking open and reimagining and rewriting. Because this is about rewriting scripts, y'all, rewriting stories, redefining the kind of foundations of society, not through the lens of our oppressor, but through the lens of our own knowledge and knowing. Do you believe your body? Do you believe the experiences you have? And if your stomach also led, okay? Stomach being the intuition also led and was at the table along with that mind, then what would you need and ask for? And not only what you need and ask for, but what could you actually give that can be received? Okay, we're going to be talking a lot about this next, I think these next years, honestly, about what it means to show up for ourselves and one another. Because you know what, y'all, we do owe each other something. You do owe somebody something. And these ideas of exchange, of reciprocity, of community are really going to have us grapple then with the kind of ways we engage in economies and the economic basis of society. Because there is more than just capitalism, communism, socialism, and the ways in which we have learned exchange and setting up our kind of what we now call nation states. Before were various ways of governing and bringing folks together in an orderly, so-called orderly fashion. We know that these projects don't really work overall for many of us. They require, again, a sacrifice, a dehumanization, a giving up of the body, which is a disassociation from the vessel that inhabits the spirit. So Mars, again, when Mars was operating in Cancer and Leo, it was asking us to feel. People were in their feelings. It's Venus and Aries, and having us have to then own the fire of our heads. And so right now, when we have the sun move into Cancer and meet Jupiter on the 24th, it is still in that square to Saturn and Neptune and Aries, who are also in a conjunction. So this is the energy of dreaming and action, y'all. What is it that you need for your sense of self to be abundant in the love and care needed for new beginnings? Let me ask that question again. What is it that you need for your own sense of self to be abundant in the love and care needed for these new beginnings? This is a time of rewriting origin stories. And I've talked about this when Neptune first moved into Aries and then Saturn. It's the rise of the cultural worker, because we have to tell new stories. We need new origin stories so that we have new directions to go in the present for different futures, right? So this time of rewriting origin stories is going to require us to do something really important that we have been conditioned for centuries to move away from, which is feel. Feelings like the corners of my mind. Feelings. You have to feel. You have to feel. Feeling and being in the body. Nostalgia, big emotions, the need to redefine our relationships with family and home. Again, home starts with the self and the vessel that holds the self, which is the body. In the solstice, introducing, right, the kind of ego and self to Cancer, because again, sun is the ego, is the sense of self. As the solstice is introducing us into Cancer, right, when it meets Jupiter, it will expand and make really clear what we need. And that square is going to be telling us that we need to do it for ourselves. The great mother Saturn is telling us we have to own these next chapters. Only we can write our motherfucking story. So what is the story we choose to write? Now, all of this week, but the weeks going forward and all my weeks that I've been doing this show, right, has to always be put in conversation with the outer planet story that is continuously unfolding. All right. I'm going to be talking more about the outer planets in particular going forward for the show. Because those outer planets changing, and again, Pluto changed into Aquarius in January, and it's going to stay there for the next 18 years. We have got Neptune in Aries will retrograde back into Pisces, but after that last retrograde, it's going to be in Aries going forward in 2026. And then Uranus now making its way first to being its toes into Gemini next month. Again, that will retrograde too next year, but then by mid to end 2026, it's chilling out in Gemini for the next 8+ years. Right? When all the outer planets change signs, it is telling us it is a time of change. So then it is a time for us to rewrite the goddamn stories and scripts. And in order for us to do that, y'all, it's time that we create new myths. Right? We got to take back our ability to imagine and provide locations that we are taught to perform. We are being asked to build new worlds, y'all. This is not some kind of fantastical. This is the reality. It's a sacred and mundane hitting, right? And for me, we have to start with the family. As again, it is the first location that we are taught to perform in specific ways. And it is the location that the colonial project heavily infiltrated and influenced in order to make us complicit in these structures to begin with, by getting you to not only understand the roles that are put upon your body via the identity, but then also be disciplined in performing that role in a certain way, right? And the role you are given with the family structure that is rooted in this kind of nuclear family construction via the colonial project is also very new. We really didn't see this push of the nuclear family as it was until it was a strategy of the state, y'all, especially during the Cold War between the U.S. and Russia, or the USSR, I should say, in the 1950s in particular, but then also through the kind of both civil rights movement in the United States, but the various decolonial movements globally in the 60s and 70s. What we see then is the state trying to find different ways to ensure that people then still buy into what it needs it to do, which is your subjugation. Right? And so with Jupiter in the sign of the mothers and the shallow waters, okay? Jupiter in the sign of the mothers and the shallow waters, and Saturn in the sign of fire of the warrior who knows nothing but initiating the self. We are being shown a new way forward in navigating these challenging and changing times by the appearance of the sky. Remember, I talked about how I see Jupiter and Saturn as our parents, being parents to us as humans, since being human ain't that fucking easy, as we can see, right? And so what they are saying is the way we navigate these challenging times is that we got to become human again. So what does it mean to be human? Do we even know? And can we rewrite that script and story to see where the hell it goes? So this brings me into this week's Astrology 101 I want to get into, which is storytelling with astrology. Because what does it mean to rewrite the story? I mean, I've been talking about this for a while. I'm going to keep talking about it. I talk about dreaming and the imagination and my praxis that I call embodied strategic dreaming, which is a practice-based methodology to help us understand what it means to embody our sense of self by working with our emotions, having them engage us and learn from them so that we can actually dream and strategize with those dreams, right? Well, astrology can help with this. This is why I'm an astrologer as well, along with an anthropologist, sacred and mundane, different ways of analyzing structure. So we can work with astrology when we look at it as a map of how to navigate our humanity and what is required to do so. Okay. So in my Patreon, actually, I've been working with folks on retelling the story of self via the planets. About last month, we did an exercise. I did a workshop with folks in which we started with the inner planets, and in particular, the sun and moon, starting off. And by looking at the house that both the sun and moon are in, along with the signs, and then any kind of conversation, which are the aspects that they have to other planets or objects, we can start to construct the story of both your sense of self and your body, right? So that you can then put that together to understand your spirit. But it also tells the story of your parents and how that parenting influenced and impacted you. Okay. So why is that? Well, the sun is the sense of self. It's identity. It's your life's purpose. It is how you express your fire. Okay, the sun is still fire. Even if your sun's in a water sign or air sign and earth sign, that is how you express your fire. Okay, the moon is the body and the emotions. Again, the materiality of the existence, the vessel that holds the spirit. It is how you express your water. Okay, so my moon's in Taurus. It's an earth sign, but that is how I express my water. Okay, it's in the body. And I can water all kinds of ways doing that. All right. So the sun tells the story of your father and fatherhood, paternity, authority, your relationship to those things. And the moon tells the story of your mother, motherhood, mothering, nurturing care, and lineage. So, an exercise you can do is to go ahead and write those stories out if you know your chart, just the sun and moon. So, as you're writing this down, again, write down what your sun is, where it's located, what house it's in, the ruler of that house, do all of that, especially with the moon. See and lay out that story. What is going on with your parents? What is going on with you? How does one influence the other? And then what does it look like to take the lead in the story once you understand the influence of the story? This is not about blame. This is not about judgment, honestly, on you or your parents. No, it's really about us taking a step back and doing what I call an ethnographic self study. It's a big part of my praxis of embodied strategic dreaming, excuse me. Right? I got to get people to learn how to study themselves by coming into the self. But we are not really taught to study ourselves. We are taught to kind of bifurcate ourselves, to place a kind of marker upon us. This is why I get weary sometimes of folks saying I'm an IMPG, or I'm a manifesting generator, or I'm a Scorpio, whatever kind of system you're using, when you are working with it as a way to box yourself in versus having it give you a kind of perspective and lens as an insight to kind of pull back and ask yourself deeper questions. Then you end up giving your authority away once again. I don't want you to do that. I don't care what kind of system you use. Again, I like astrology, but there's plenty of other ones can engage with. This is about learning how to work with different tools so that we can learn different ways of telling the stories. Okay? Because it's also not just about the hero's journey. I know that is a very popular story making kind of template, especially in the West. But even with that, right, even with that hero's journey, has it really helped us in moving past these kind of binary ways of thinking and being? Has the hero's journey, in which we have been taught that there must be a hero, so therefore a villain, there must be good versus bad, right? Does it allow for us to sit in the gray? Does it allow for us to understand and maybe put into context why someone may be labeled as quote unquote bad, and then why the other person is labeled as quote unquote good? And do those definitions and does that story actually make sense on the ground for your lived experience? Because again, there's more than one way to tell a story. So can we change the ways in which the stories are told, the ordering of them, and how we define the characters that make up that story to begin with? Okay. Now I talk a lot more about this in my Patreon. So if you're interested, y'all go over there, because for the next 6 months, we're going to be doing storytelling and story making. Now this can be done with all the inner planets in different ways, because the inner planets give us different aspects of ourselves. And then you can move to the outer planets to tell the story of society more writ large. So what does it look like to rewrite that story of society, right? And this is what the cosmos is asking us to do. They really are asking us in these transits to rewrite these stories and scripts, but it was going to require us to dream. So do we know how to dream? Let's get into that. Let's get some yapping, y'all. Okay, I got all kinds of shit to say, so I'm going to try to make this coherent, all right? And I want to start with this South Node in Virgo. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about Mars in Virgo, but I want to come back to it, right? Because it really is asking us to let go of the ways we have been taught analytics, research, and what it means to be quote unquote orderly. Because has that shit worked, right? Has it worked? Or has it made us more docile? Has it made us quote unquote more neurotic, so that we are always fighting ourselves versus being able to kind of work through those emotions to do something else? Has privileging Western knowledge production helped us truly imagine new worlds outside of extraction and dehumanization? Because even the kind of fantasies and myths and sci-fi stories that are really privileged and highlighted honestly tell the same story. They tell the same story of subjugation and fighting back against an oppressor, and then what happens after, right? But what does happen after? And what happens if we fight back differently, right? We have to imagine it so that we can have the courage to enact it in some way. So again, this is about feeling and knowing, learning to work with the knowledge of the body and the information we garner from the stomach. So again, what is your stomach telling you? So Mars in Virgo truly is activating this. It is igniting the stomach and asking, what does it mean for us to strategize with our knowing, our bodies, our lineages, right? Again, it's all about where we come from to figure out where we're trying to go. Mars was previously, again, in the signs of Cancer and Leo, reminding us that we truly do need love and tenderness and care. And not in this passive aggressive energy, because people kept talking about Mars and Cancer is energy. Fuck that. It's an energy that knows the importance of emotions and how emotional one can and does need to get in order to work with the energy of fire. Right? In Leo, Mars learned it had to grow up and into itself because the heart has needs and they must be met. Now he is going into the body, Virgo, which also rules health, and is helping us assess the health of our bodies. But do we believe and can we listen? Again, and what would you do if you did? Mars is about action and we are being called to action. So again, what's the strategy, y'all? Just repeating what has been done without context, but with such moral superiority is exactly what the colonial wants us to do, because that is how it reproduces itself and infests different hosts and different spaces. So whose sight are you using in all this imagination, in all this imagining, and do you even know? Because, see, we have been taught to see ourselves and one another in the world through the eyes of the colonial that cannot see itself, so it projects. And we've been living in a projection that is nothing more than white fantasy coded as the universal reality. So, what happens if we take that back? It starts with the self, reclaiming the self, understanding that the self is more than the mind. It is the totality of your embodiment. This is what Saturn and Jupiter are reminding us is a sit in fire and water, together which makes steam that can be both scalding but also clarifying. So can we gain clarity and realize that the stories we tell ourselves actually do matter because we are living in the imagination of the past that has no real present or future? Saturn in Aries is ahead of responsibility and time, right? We are being asked to lead our heads and take responsibility for our time. So can we go back and rewrite the scripts? Next to Neptune, we need a different type of glamour. The illusions we have been sitting with and in have cost us dearly, y'all. And we are just being fed more remixes and remakes of old storylines that keep us in these goddamn hero-type journeys that always require us to pick a side. But what if both sides ain't shit? What if the shit we are fed, it's like, I don't want none of this shit. And can we then imagine other things differently? Which means you're going to have to get comfortable being disruptive. This is what Uranus and Taurus energy is really getting us to understand. You got to get comfortable in uncomfortability because you're already uncomfortable to begin with. Uranus just shook the table a little bit, said, let me just do a little bit of a nudge to see how solid this so-called security and safety of society is. And we saw real quick, that shit ain't nothing but a goddamn MLM. So do we believe? And if we do, can we let go, South Node and Virgo, let go of the holds the colonial project's mental processes has on us and get back into the Piscean waters of our spirit, of our knowing, right? We have been trained so well to place our hopes and dreams in others, people, concepts, theories, gods. Again, we're being asked to go back to faith and the family with Jupiter and Cancer. I know this really well about having to rewrite the script of family and friend. Because the definitions I was relying upon kept me in relationships previously where I always placed the needs of others above my own. And when I would center me then, because I actually do have needs, right? Those relationships would crumble, or I was told I was being selfish. Make it about them again, right? And then I broke under all of that strain. Like literally, not only did I slip a disc and pinch an L4 nerve that laid me out 20 years ago in Ireland, so that I still have chronic pain and problems in my lower back. When I don't listen to my body now, when I'm constantly trying to be of service and thinking that is care and nurturing, the inflammation of my body gets so strong that it reminds me that although I may be 6'3", I am not meant to carry the burdens of everyone else around me. So our bodies talk to us, but can we listen? Our emotions are signaling to us things that we must face. Do we believe? If I stopped believing the inflammation of my body, I would be dead. And I mean that shit, y'all. And I'm saying this out of love for everybody else. You got to believe your bodies and your emotions. That pain you are feeling, you cannot disassociate from. You cannot mindfulness away. You cannot meditate and just observe it. You got to feel that bitch. You need to sit with it. You need to work with it. You need to ask it. Put it at the table next to you and say, pain, what are you trying to tell me? And then when your pain talks, I need you to listen to it. What is it saying? My pain told me that it was tired. Okay? My pain told me it was tired. I was fucking tired, y'all. I'm still tired, but I was exhausted. Trying to figure out, hustle here, go there, sit in justice spaces, try to do all of these processes, right? Working with folks, believing people, even though their actions did not meet what they were saying, left me damn near broke and sick and almost dead. So I had to believe my pain and say, okay, if I don't want to feel like this anymore, and if I can't afford, quite frankly, to keep disassociating in the ways that I was, because that doesn't feel good either after a while, because I'm getting older, right? I'm 43, I'll be 44 in August. Well, then if I want to be living and alive, then I must allow the vessel that is keeping me alive to actually talk and lead a bit more than the mind that has got me all kinds of fucked up because it has been conditioned and trained through literally the institution of education that is one of the main foundations that established the colonial project to begin with. Know your goddamn oppressor and believe them. That is also what Saturn and Aries next to Neptune is asking us to do. Do you believe the motherfucker that came from the deep shores and onto the land? Can you see now? Can you see what has been glamoring you? And if you do, then do you want to be glamored by that, or do you want to make your own glamour? That's living, that's life, that's creation, that's the human. We are creative beings, so what are we creating and why? And I wanted to create a life in which I didn't feel pain, you know? I wanted to create a life in which I could raise my child and not feel like I was responsible for everything. Mothering in these societies is hard, whether you are identified as a woman or not. Right? Mothering in this society is hard when we don't value the mother or nurturing or care, because that version of the family unit is meant to be of service. It's meant to give up the sense of self for the patriarch. What does that remind us of? We get groomed in our family systems when we operate through the Western colonial project as a way for us to go then into other institutions and operate accordingly. And when you don't like to operate in those scripts, what happens? You can become the black sheep of your family, and or you can become the scapegoat of these other institutions. So I realized I got tired of all of that shit too. Right? Not only was my pain telling me you don't take other people's burdens, my pain was also telling me I needed fucking help. I needed help. Which means that I needed to stop trying to live by myself, paying, like I said before, another video or another episode, excuse me, when I was talking about paying all these goddamn bills while I'm also fighting to be paid by clients and organizations that claim to be about justice, but don't want to be just in the actual fucking exchange. I had to start believing my reality and moving and writing the script. So that's when I decided to take a friend up on an offer and move into a queer house, a collective house with two other queer folks, and really start to rethink and remake on the ground what family and community mean to me. Because I believe heavily in family and community. I grew up communally. My house was one, even though my mother, and my mother's a Gemini, y'all. A black woman, boomer Gemini, who went through a lot of shit in her life, right? There was a way that that woman taught me duality, because while she could not give me and a lot of my siblings the true love and nurturing we needed from a mother, all we saw that woman do was nurture and care for others. She was a burn trauma ICU nurse at Cook County Hospital until she had to be forced retired 5 years ago because her body broke down over and over and over again. I've had to be at that woman's deathbed, not even joking, more than once, more than 4 times actually in the past 4 or 5 years. My house was always one in which there was somebody else living with us. And I'm one of 5, y'all. It was a big ass family already. And if people needed a place to stay, my mother had to make sure that house was open. She took in handicap wards of the state. who had no other place to go because they were adults. She ended up, paying for my brother's friends to go to CNA school because she said, you can't do nothing without some type of education. You got to be able to make money for yourself some way. And so in that community living, I understood that we need one another. But I also learned it in a very toxic way because she used it as a means of control. That was how she understood love. If I can control you in some way, that I can love you, but then I also feel like I'll get love back. And that's not healthy because then I also learned to only give up myself, to be the one that has to make all the money, to be the one that has to always lead. And that's not sustainable because I saw it not be sustainable for her. And it was also kind of a lie because I also saw my father right there with her. Right. I saw the different ways that they did have to navigate. And when other people were not there and showed up for them, how hard my financially, resource wise, and energetically it was for us in the house who were the children. So I decided that I want to do something different. I wanted to mother differently. I wanted my child to be able to have other adults in their lives who also care for them and can teach them different ways. And I wanted help so that it wasn't all on me, because we are not meant to do this thing called life alone. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. If we were, then the way in which we are birthed and have to be nurtured and cared for would not be there, because it would not be quote unquote advantageous for us. It is more advantageous for us as a society, as human beings, to be in community and be communal. But we do not know what community means anymore, y'all. That's why a lot of these processes don't work. That's why a lot of these kind of concepts and theories about justice, when you put them on the ground, tend to implode because we are not facing our own sense of self and our realities, and the fact that to get to those justice steps, we have to first come back into and embody our humanity, our vessel. We got to feel. You got to feel and acknowledge it and realize sometimes just talking this shit through ain't going to always get it there. Sometimes you got to move. Sometimes you got to cuss somebody out. Sometimes you got to fight, not necessarily somebody else, but just the air, just to get it out, right? So that you can then clear the way for a new ground, for a new foundation, for a new sense of stability and floor that you can now recreate. Okay, I've been thinking a lot about the family, been thinking a lot about what it means for us to break the things that aren't working for us at the most foundation and root. And for a long time, I started with big institutions, right? Going into higher ed and nonprofits and other organizations and working with them and thinking we can, take back resources and power and do all of this. And it's been in that work that I've had my heart broken the most, over and over and over and over and over and over again. And finally, I had to believe. I had to believe. And as I talked about last week, it really came to a head with this latest issue that I had with an organization that says it's committed to social justice, but then again didn't want to pay me and basically the straight out lied when I filed my grievance about what the events occurred. But I also believe my experiences, so I kept receipts. I am a Scorpio rising who's also a fucking researcher. I had to believe my past and experiences, while a bit naively believing that this next one, while not being different, I had more of my bases covered. Even with my bases covered, I am still out a lot of fucking money, and I need my money to be able to survive, right? That is the reality. And exchange is not just capitalism, socialism, or communism, again, as I said before, right? Exchange means that we understand and see each other's humanity, and there is a need that I must have met so that eventually you can have your needs met as well. This is the ideas of gift and exchange, y'all. This is what a lot of societies, economic and political systems were based upon for a long ass time before that European colonial project came in and reconstituted everything through the lens of its feudalistic understandings of hierarchy of life that now gets us this capitalistic hellscape in which we think that we are seeing one another and being just to each other, but all we are still doing is extracting from one another and calling that justice. We gotta rewrite these fucking scripts. By rewriting who we are and how we relate to our sense of self. Do you know what your wants and needs are and your desires? Can you express and articulate them? And then when you do, can you believe other folks who can or cannot meet them? And from there, formulating the basis of what we call community and family. Because I'm gonna tell you something right now, I come from a very large family, but I have only now experienced what true family is by the folks I'm living with. and the friends that I now have. And they're all queer, majority Black, all queer. And we all have a similar story in one way. So we also know what it means to be thrown away, and also realizing that we are more than other people's projections because they can't see their own humanity. Therefore, they're afraid to actually embody their own quote unquote individuality. Because again, the individuality that we are presenting is nothing more than scripts that we perform. And when you step outside that script, that is when you are chastised. That's when you are told that you are the problem. When your self comes out in these individualistic streets, then that is when you know your humanity is now at the front door. I want you to lean all into that. And you will find your people. This is a time of chaos, y'all, which means it's a time of things being reshuffled and reordered. And Mars in Virgo is saying that we have the ability to keep, move, and work through this mess, but you're going to have to use a different strategy because that South Node is saying you got to give up the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. You got to give up the disassociation. You got to give up this idea that somehow your health does not need to be centered. If you have no body, you have no liberation. Okay. So this again is why I'm focusing so much on the family. Right. And I'm starting with my astrological practices, with the parent-child readings, as a way to kind of re-engage what this quote unquote decolonial work looks like. And for me, I'm not even calling it decolonial anymore. I really am calling it human work. Right. I am and want to continue to do the work of the human and humanization. And since it's a time of the human, right, this is a time of the human has to come back to itself because we are seeing the rise of a new technology, this AI technology, right? We have to then learn from the past and past technological advances so that we can help ourselves in the present navigate quite frankly, an already predetermined future, that there will be a new technology that we're going to have to work with. But again, AI technology, while it's being purported as this next big thing that is so different from what came before, it's really not, y'all. It's much more quote unquote advanced, but so was the Industrial Revolution. That was highly quote unquote advanced, right? And what did that do? The Industrial Revolution stole the sun. It stole the sun by being able to make the day go into the night, right? Therefore, stealing our rest, which helps steal our dreams. So what do we learn from that time? What are we learning right now in the present from that past? And as we are being faced with this so-called new technological advancement that is constantly showing us, right, with Pluto retrograde in Aquarius right now, that there's a shit ton of kinks here, and the falsehood of promises that we were fed do not articulate itself on the ground. Do we believe that and understanding that the only way we're going to be able to combat this is by taking our authority back and coming back into the human to figure out what it means for us to know what our needs are, our wants and our desires, and then being able to work with that technology so that it is not leading us once again into further dehumanization, but that it can be a companion as we are trying to reconfigure this thing called society, therefore life. Okay? Let me stop there, y'all. Next week, we're going to get into the new moon in Cancer because it's going to open up the week with this new moon in Cancer after the Sun and Jupiter have met. So the primordial mothers are loud, and it is time to bring back the old gods. I'll explain more about what I mean by that next week. But if you're in my Patreon, I have a video up about this already, okay? And I'll be rolling out more of this on the Patreon because we're going to be getting into N.K. Jemisin's The 100,000 Kingdoms, which is book 1 of 3 of her Inheritance trilogy, to help us kind of provide a template of what it means to kind of rewrite these stories by thinking about what does it mean to bring back the old gods, but in new ways, right? Okay, so join me there for more. And again, if you're interested in a reading with me, especially my new offerings, which are the Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts, along with parent or parent and a child reading, check out my website, y'all, drnicolerouse.com. And I will be rolling out new offerings, new workshops, and seminars around astrology and storytelling, especially when it comes to the sense of self and working with ancestors and lands over the next 6 months. So to be up to date on those new offerings as well, please go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter on my website and or my Substack, which is at Dr. Nicole Rouse, because that is where I'll be putting out that information, okay? And when you're on the channel as well, just keep, make sure your notification is on because I do also make community posts. I like those. I got a bunch already on there. So if you peruse my page, you'll see some of my poetry that I did in April as well. So you can get a better sense of how I am actively reconstructing the story of what it means to be human by reconstructing the story of my sense of self, okay? As an example. All right. That's all I got, y'all. So as always, keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through the dreamscapes that we can bring the future, say we want, into the present. Oh, real quick also, this on actually Saturday, right after the solstice, if you want to hear me talk with my good friend, Dr. Moya Bailey, about Octavia Butler, dreaming and new world building, come on out to Women and Children First bookstore in the north side of Chicago. We will be in conversation along with having a few other poets and music to set the mood and get us into this dreamscape. That's from 7 to 9 p.m. at Women and Children First bookstore. It is a fundraiser, so there is a ticket. Masks are required, but I will have more information about that in the show notes, and it is also on the front page of my website, okay? So that truly is it. Keep on dreaming, y'all. I'll be back next week. I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. Like Michelle sang. The cosmos, where we come from. The light that lit the way for our ancestors in the dark of night. When they had to leave the spaces that tried to steal their breath and life. Reworking, while also learning how to work with the land that was also being worked. A land and people under duress. The trees did not ask if they wanted to participate in such brutal practices. Yet here they were. Here we are. All beholden to a power structure that only knows how to take and never to give, while telling us this is the right way to live. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. As Michelle sang, the cosmos. Learn, imagine that freedom lied in parable of the sower that sowed the seeds of earth's seed that wanted to bring humans back to the stars, to start again, to start anew. Remember where we come from and who we are. The stars that lit the way, that guide the light. The moon that holds the tides of the waters, our connection to earth and land. As above, so below, yet we don't know, because we have lost the above and the below. So I don't want to be right, I just want to be free, and journey to the cosmos.